founding of the New Age movement can be traced back to the 19th century in Theosophy. This is the group that largely popularized this belief that we are heading out of the age of Pisces and into the astrological age of Aquarius, which to them will be an age of unity of humanity, an age of enlightenment, a spiritual age of consciousness, so to speak. This admitted New World Order agenda to create a one-world government that rules over humanity is not only political, it is also spiritual and based on what is known as the New Age. This can be verified with irrefutable documentation.
Here's their metaphor. Adam and Eve were held prisoner in the Garden of Eden by an unjust, cruel, and vindictive God. Until Lucifer, through his agent Satan, set man free from this garden by giving him the gift of intellect. Through the use of intellect, man will conquer the earth, will conquer, and will himself become God. It's taught in every Masonic temple in this land. Every secret brotherhood, every secret society, every mystical temple, every occult organization teaches the Luciferian philosophy.
To understand the New World Order and the New Age worldview, we must go back into history and examine its origins. But first we must define our terms. By New Age, I am speaking about a worldview that has many facets and components, such as astrological and zodiacal beliefs in the New Age concept, channeling higher powers to achieve knowledge, meditation, the belief that all is one or forms of monism, the belief that we can attain godhood, esotericism, or in other words, reinterpreting ancient texts to find hidden meanings and unify all religious belief into one. To understand what is going on today with respect to the New World Order and the New Age movement, we must have recourse to the 19th century organization called the Theosophical Society. This organization in particular, among others, is largely responsible for the modern New Age movement and the political doctrine known as the New World Order. The founder of this organization was a woman named Helena Petrovna Blavatsky.
Genius and the mother of the New Age. Given her lifelong concern with things mystical, metaphysical, and spiritual, it's perhaps surprising to discover that she had an effect on the world we know in ways we could hardly imagine. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, Madame Blavatsky, HPB, whatever you call her, she was a larger-than-life woman. Blavatsky would make it commonplace to see Eastern religions, Hinduism and Buddhism, as important sacred teachings. It's not just yoga that has become part of Western life. It's everything from crystals to religious icons to books on esoteric secrets of the East and West.
The most important thing about Blavatsky is her role in trying to synthesize a global spirituality that explains all religions. That's something that is almost standard now among New Age gurus. But she was the first person who took on the task of trying to explain the entire gamut of human spirituality and to embody what she had learned in the course of studying all these religious traditions. She was, beginning in childhood, but more in adolescence, also exposed to Russian occultism in the form of Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism because her great-grandfather had a vast library that in her later recollections she said she had devoured every book in.
It could be that this is where she got much of her knowledge that she was famous for in later life. There's not much said about what she was doing, except that she apparently went to those locations where the esoteric or occult knowledge was prominent.
She traveled to India, the Far East. She traveled to America, North and South, investigating mystic traditions the world around.
She went on to Cairo, and she tried to establish a life for herself there, and how she supported herself was giving seances. She connected with the community there that were into paranormal phenomena.
Although very interested in spiritualism, HPB's understanding of the phenomena was somewhat different than her fellow mediums. But she did explore this world and produced many manifestations.
She could slow time down. Some other examples where she could make things appear or disappear. Yes, all of these were demonstrated.
In 1873, Madame Blavatsky continued her spiritual journey and set sail for the United States.
She read in the paper stories written by a man named Henry Olcott.
Henry Steele Olcott was a respected member of New York society. He had worked for the New York Tribune. With a lingering interest in spiritualism from his youth, Olcott decided to investigate some intriguing spirit manifestations that were occurring at a farmhouse in Vermont. Convinced of the validity of the spirits, he wrote an account of his observations for the New York papers. He then headed back to the farmhouse to investigate the phenomena further. Madame Blavatsky was intrigued both by a desire to continue her investigation into spiritualist phenomena and perhaps to meet the author of these interesting articles. Not only was Olcott's first meeting with Blavatsky memorable, but the manifestations they experienced together at the Eddy farm convinced him of how extraordinary it was. According to HPB, the spirits they encountered during their seances were numerous, and many were familiar to her.
Blavatsky starts to become a book author in her own right, slowly beginning to work on what became Isis Unveiled.
This was HPB's first major work, and offers her insights on both Eastern and Western religion and philosophy.
Olcott was her collaborator in the writing process, which involved many strange phenomena which convinced him that she was being assisted by invisible helpers, not only in the spirit world, but living men elsewhere who were communicating telepathically or occupying her body and writing through her.
Blavatsky explained that these invisible helpers were adepts or masters who are part of a brotherhood of enlightened spiritual beings.
Olcott talks about hands appearing mysteriously and writing during the night while she's asleep. The composition process of Isis Unveiled is only the first instance where the authorship of items that appear under her name is somewhat confused, because both she and Olcott say that there were many others helping behind the scenes.
HPB communicated mainly with two masters, Moria and Kuthumi.
These masters are more spiritually evolved. That means that they can live longer, hundreds of years. They have much more knowledge. They are almost, if you can use an analogy, almost resembling, we might say, the hidden hand theory, which means that behind this world there is a small cadre of individuals who are controlling things. And so these masters are in separate brotherhoods in India, in Egypt, and elsewhere, who are helping to perhaps control the progress of the planet and spreading the wisdom. There is quite a bit mentioned about out-of-body experiences or astral projection. So it could very well be that this was the true purpose of the society. How do you, in fact, go beyond your ordinary imperfect self and become perfected, to become an adept, for instance? And it seems to me that if you put this together with the notion of the masters, it could very well be that the masters were perceived to be human beings who projected themselves out of the body. And that was the reason why they can go literally anywhere in the world to communicate with individuals. That is the reason why masters were not looked upon with skepticism, that they did have this ability and that they themselves, theosophists, expected to have this same ability.
Perhaps this helps to explain phenomena that HPB was said to perform.
Her being able to physically transform her appearance into that of a man with black hair and then change back into herself. Alcott describes things like this that are just impossible to interpret, but remain fascinating as to what was really going on.
The two of them had many discussions, and they also had many visitors to their apartment, people who were also interested in the occult, who found everything that Madame had to say very interesting. And at some point, Alcott said to this little group, wouldn't it be useful to form a club or a society to study the occult phenomenon further? And Madame Blavatsky said, yes, that's a very good idea.
The Theosophical Society was formed in 1875 and still exists today with branches all over the world.
She started a magazine in 1887 called Lucifer Magazine. Her principal work, The Secret Doctrine, was then published in 1888. She then wrote The Key to Theosophy and The Voice of Silence. These works are now famous, and contained in these writings are the doctrines that helped mold the New Age movement to what it is today. Or Age of Aquarius was popularized by Blavatsky. She taught Theosophists, at any rate, some of them who understand the hidden meaning of the universally expected avatars, messiahs, socioshis, and Christs, know that it is no end of the world, but the consummation of the age, i.e. the close of a cycle, which is now fast approaching. Again, the messianic cycle of the man connected with Pisces. It is a cycle, historical, and not very long, but very occult, lasting about 2,155 solar years. It occurred 2,410 and 255 BC, or when the equinox entered into the sign of Ram, and again into that of Pisces. When it enters in a few years the sign of Aquarius, psychologists will have some extra work to do, and the psychic idiosyncrasies of humanity will enter on a great change. Helena Blavatsky taught her students that it is actually Satan who is God, the Messiah, and that Jehovah is the evil one. She stated, quote, even from the dead letter standpoint, to view Satan, the serpent of Genesis, as the real creator and benefactor, the father of spiritual mankind. For it is he who was the harborer of light, bright radiant Lucifer, who opened the eyes of the automation created by Jehovah, as alleged, and he who was the first to whisper, in the day ye eat thereof, ye shall be as Elohim, knowing good and evil, can only be regarded in the light of a savior, an adversary to Jehovah, the personating spirit. He still remains in esoteric truth, the ever-loving messenger, the angel, the seraphim and cherubim, who both knew well and loved still more, and who conferred on us spiritual instead of physical immortality.